may help, but I have no obligation, right? So equality and what's the other one? Rights, both are accommodated.
Right. I guess I was considering equality in terms of possessions, but rather than,
Distributive justice.
right.
Distributive
Equality
justice.
of distribution.
Okay, that's absolute. Justice, and especially, John Rawls' idea of distributive justice. That's missing. What else?
Responsibility.
Absolutely.
Compassion.
Great. So you got some of these really great values. Now, you heard about Buchanan, James Buchanan, who actually got a Nobel Prize in economics, very much loved by the conservatives. And he advocated the importance of freedom as the only value that's respected in that should be upheld in the marketplace. Then after Enron, the Enron disaster, he said, my gosh, responsibility is also important. If these CEOs are all free, they're not responsible, we'd be in major trouble. More recently, actually in a conversation with me, and he said, we need to have decency. These guys, they may be responsible, they're not going to violate any laws, but they are not decent. That they just want to, entitlement, try to amass incredible amount of money, are not decent. Of course, if they're decent, like Bill Gates, that he give up all his money. And because he's a good man, he's a responsible person. He was not that when he was young, but he learned, we respect it. So that's important. Compassion in particular. If you have to define what a human being is, a reductionist model, Confucians would say a human being is of course a rational animal, but that's not enough. A human being is a sympathetic animal. Sympathetic, empathetic, and compassionate. Without the feeling of compassion, without the feeling of sympathy, you're not human. Why? Because this notion about not responsibility, but responsiveness, an important part of the human practice, we are responsive. We can be touched by the outside world. This is something uniquely human. Can you imagine anything in the world that is absolutely not related to you, if you are aware? Anything in the world you can think of. The interesting thing is that as soon as you think about it, as soon as you're conscious of it, it becomes linked. The distant star, not just astronomers, we are all fascinated if something happens, or a blade of grass, or anything, or a stranger, whether the stranger is going to be very rich, healthy, or the stranger is very miserable. I may not do anything, but my consciousness, my sympathy is being touched. So every human being is sympathetic. Rationality is something that you really have to work hard to get. And there was an old notion about rationality which is very restricted. The idea of rationality, human being as a rational being in terms of nature, the scientific spirit, is what Bacon would call the knowledge is power. Very different from the Greek idea knowledge is wisdom. Why knowledge is power? Because if you have knowledge, you can understand nature. You can control nature, subdue nature, eventually use nature. This is what we call the Faustian spirit, try to conquer nature. This is even rooted in the biblical tradition. When human beings are created, what God did. So allowed human beings to have dominion over the world. Right now, some of the theologians under the influence of environmentalism and ecology say that dominion doesn't mean control. That dominion means stewardship. We should take care of everything. I like that interpretation, but it's probably not originally inherited in that tradition. But anyway, one theologian told me that anthropocentrism is absolutely necessary for him to do theology, because man is created in the image of God. Now, let's leave that question aside. You have a question? No? Okay. And so this notion about interconnectedness with the world, this sympathy becomes the core of the Confucian ethical system. Humanity means sensitivity and sympathy. And all the virtues, all the values you can think of must be connected with that. If you are wise, you are very intelligent, but you're not compassionate from a Confucian point of view, that is not intelligence. That is just being smart. If you're righteous, you're very legalistic, and you don't have any compassion, then the legal system becomes harsh. Eventually will defeat itself. If you're very ritualistic, this is a Confucian idea, be civil, and you don't have any compassion, that civility will become form, the kind of formless, not a formless, a mere formality. If you don't have compassion, you are courageous. In essence, you're not courageous. You're just being brave. And the brave that can show your macho self. It's not necessarily courage in the best sense of it. On the other hand, all these values that I mentioned will enrich our notion about sympathy. So the idea of sympathy is not emotional, therefore it's not rational. Many philosophers, even some of the best philosophers, such as Gadamer, to understand even Habermas, in the great German tradition, influenced by Kant, and would not consider sympathy as a very important virtue. Of course, now under the influence of the Nazi movement, when everybody was mobilized to do something, and the mobilization itself was wrong, based upon a different kind of feeling. Everybody suffers, so rationality becomes important. But this notion about sympathy, in the Confucian point of view, is rational, is righteous, is related to justice, is related to wisdom. So all the values will enrich this idea of sympathy. The idea of sympathy links to all the virtues, but each and every virtue will enrich this idea of sympathy. That's the notion about spiritual humanism. Any questions? Yes.
It seems like a lot of what distinguishes something from being sort of good, a virtue, versus just like bravery versus courage is intention. Is it true that intention is
well, intention is good, but it's even better. It's not intentional.
Okay.
It's part of your personality.
Okay.
So you don't do it, for example, your question, so you become altruistic. You do it because you think it's right, for you to realize yourself. So intentionality is very important, because otherwise nothing will be accomplished at a conscious level. But if you do it, it becomes part of your nature. Even unconsciously, you try to be decent. And this something requires struggle. Now for next week, we'll be focusing on the analects. And I just want to use one short note. Most of you will be somewhat confused or look at the analects and not inspired and feel that it's kind of what the finger called archaic irrelevancy. But I want you to read from the analects. Don't read about it. There's a difference. If you read about it, you try to look at it as an object and try to see how they came into being, whether simultaneous interpretation is right, whether this word is translated correctly, why I don't understand it, and so forth. To read from it, you say it's a kind of dialogical relationship. And once I developed this idea with another sinologist, he laughed at me. He said, Wei-ming, what we are, our biological partner is dead. How can you have a dialogue with a dead person? Well, the text is alive. Any text that is considered a classical text is always alive. We don't read it by imposing our egoistic concerns. You're not sophomores, right? Any of you sophomores? The idea of sophomoric is very bad, right? Because if you assign a number of books, often the books will have a lot of comments. And the comments are basically very negative. Oh, this guy is stupid. It doesn't make any sense, or something of that nature. So I want you to first sustain your psychology of